Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a wonderful first for our programs at Pasadena Public Library. We are coming to you live with Iris, Jamahl, Dunkle at the House of Happy Walls, Charmaine Kittredge London's home, located at Jack London Historic Park near Glen Ellen on the eastern slope of the Sonoma Mountains. So it's very fun to be coming live from actually a historical place. Today's program is part of the special program called State Park Pass, put on by the libraries of the state of California. And if you come to any of our Pasadena public libraries, you can pick up with your library card a pass. You check it out with your library card. It gives you free admittance to a California state park. And there are over 200 state parks in California. So we're very honored that Iris is presenting to us today live from the Jack London Historic Park, actually in the House of Happy Walls. Iris is a prolific poet, biographer, and essayist and writer. She's presented for us before her poetry book, West Fire Archive, and her book about Charmaine Kittredge London. And she's also written a book titled Interrupted Geography, Gold Passage, and There's a Ghost in This Machine of Air. And we are absolutely delighted to be able to welcome Iris again. It's a big treat for the library and for you as well. So could you please mute yourself? The program today will be recorded and you can look on it afterwards. The program today on YouTube Pasadena Library. It will take us approximately 1 week to get it on YouTube. Following Iris's presentation, you can put your questions in chat and Iris will answer your questions as well. I have enabled live screening, so you can put that on your own computer so that you can actually read what Iris is saying if you would like to do that as well. So welcome, Iris. This is very exciting for us to be able to come live from Jack London Historic State Park.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be speaking to you from one of my favorite places in the world, Jack London State Historic Park. I'm here with a live audience in the House of Happy Walls. So live audience, say hello. Yeah. It's fun to do a hybrid event like this. When I released the book, it was in this very room in 2020. And there was no live audience because, of course, the pandemic was pretty intense at that point. But I'm really happy to be in this room. A little bit about my history with the park. Jack London State Park is really special to me because when I was in the 6th grade, I went on a field trip here. And up to that point, I was, all I did was write in school. I didn't pay attention. I just wrote stories. And when I came to Jack London State Park, I realized that that was like a career path. I was so excited that I didn't have to pay attention in school at all. All I needed to do was read books and write, and that's what I did. So, but little did I know is on that day when I came here on that field trip, the House of Happy Walls was the only museum on the property at the time. Now there's also a cottage which was refurbished, and that's where Jack and Charmaine lived together. Jack London and Charmaine Kittredge London lived together. That wasn't remodeled at the time. And so this was the only museum, the House of Happy Walls, and that's the house where Charmaine actually lived. When I came here, when I was younger, there was only the story of Jack London. In fact, this upstairs was where Charmaine lived, but there was not a single mention of her or her life. And I'm very happy to say that a few years ago, this museum was completely remodeled. And as you'll see, there's a lot of Charmaine around me. This is her on horseback. And this exhibit is called the Trailblazer Exhibit because Charmaine was such a trailblazer during her time. She bent gender norms. She wasn't afraid to ask questions about rules that were made for women. And she led Jack on many of the adventures that he went on. She actually was the one doing the adventure most of the time, although she didn't get credit for it all the time, including she helped write some of his books, which was one of the amazing discoveries that I had from the research I did. So I'm going to read to you from a little bit from two different books. This is Charming Kittredge London, Trailblazer Author Adventurer, and this is Westfire Archive. So this is a biography that I wrote over 6 years about Charmion's life by doing research at the Huntington Library and at the state park, along with other collections throughout the country. And then this is a book of poems that the first section is all about the biographical work, the research I did in the archives. So as a poet, first, my process was to write poetry about the fact that Charmion's name had been erased from the story of Jack London. And I really had to work through that as a writer through her archives first. So I'm going to start by reading a poem. And this poem is about the House of Happy Walls. And it's about the day that I first got to come in here when it was completely stripped of everything in it. I don't know why they let me, but the park let me come in by myself without being supervised. And so, of course, I looked everywhere and found all kinds of interesting things, including a room that I'll show you, hopefully, at the end that was always dubbed her guest room. So right now where we're standing is where Charmion's bedroom was. Her bed was over there by the fireplace. And she had a desk in here. She had all kinds of interesting furniture in here. That room that was called her guest room, though, what I discovered when I was by myself in this house is that it was actually her office, which no one thought, because they thought that Charmion wasn't a writer, even though she published 4 books during her lifetime. So this is called House Empty Speaks Loud a Truth, 2018. 1. House made of breath exhaled from wooden ribs. 2. Dale Carnegie's name scribbled on a cream closet door. 3. A nautilus shell eating a light bulb sheds the softest light. 4. Calabashes painted gray sway from their ropes whenever the earth shakes. Someone tried to mute their colors. 5. She designed the house so that it would never burn. 6. The rock patio has a pyramid-shaped staircase that leads up and over the edge. 7. Left unattended, I slid every window latch open, shimmied through sliding doors. 8. You could hear the sound of red-breasted robins singing from the 2nd floor. 9. The silver-painted wallpaper came off on my fingertips. 10. What they thought was a guest room was actually her office. 11. When the state cataloged the house, everyone forgot she was a writer. 12. It never burned. 13. Bays and oaks move closer to the house. Hear their leaves whisper. 14. Though they'll cover the fountain in the sun-filled dining room, its waters will keep broadcasting to future visitors. So for those in the room, you may notice we have a calabash hanging from the ceiling, which is one of the lamps she uses to kind of dull the light a little, so it was like a kind of like a more soothing light. But they were painted these bright colors, but they were painted over by the state. You can see that one's been recovered a bit. So there's one on the far, if you're in the room, you can see there's a calabash that she brought over from the South Seas when they went on their snark journey. That's been painted bright blue, and that color, those colors there are more like the colors that would have been in here. So she loved bright colors. And downstairs is her kitchen, and there used to be a fountain, a water fountain inside of the kitchen. So she could hear the sound of water indoors. That was part of her aesthetic to bring the outside inside. And everything is turquoise. It's beautiful downstairs. So I'll be giving you a visual tour of the park as well. So how about a little bit about Charmian? I want to tell you a little bit about, I'm going to start from the beginning because it takes place in this actual house, in the House of Happy Walls. And it talks a little bit about what actually happened, why Charmian's story was erased. And it's where I began telling this story. Because like I said, I came to Charmian without knowing who she was, because no one had actually been able to tell her story. And the reason why is because of a writer named Irving Stone, who wrote a biography that completely maligned Charmian. And he tricked her basically into signing away all of her rights. So I'm going to read a few pages from this. While I'm reading from this, and also, the poetry, please think of questions, both on Zoom and in the room, so that I can answer them at the end. How to tell the story of a life. Charmian's soft, short chestnut hair was damp and her skin was cool from her hour-long swim in the lake on London Ranch, where she and her husband, the famed American author Jack London, used to swim together. It was a perfect summer day in 1934, almost 20 years after his death. The August sun swung high in the sky. Hawks circled the thermals in meandering loops, letting out piercing cries. Taking it all in, she rode her horse, Patty, down the rolling golden hills on Northern California's Sonoma Mountain. Even at 65 years old, she kept her body fit with daily swims and horseback rides. Halfway down a hill, the glint of sun against a string of barbed wire startled Patty, and the horse shied, tripped, and fell to its knees. Losing her grip, Charmian was thrown, her foot locked in the stirrup. As her beloved horse struggled to stand, its immense weight rolled over and crushed Charmian's tiny frame. She screamed for what she thought would be the last time. Down the hill, Eliza Shepherd, Jack's stepsister and Charmian's close friend, whom she called Sis, and who managed the ranch, heard Charmian scream and rushed to the scene, fearing Charmian would be dead when she found her. Eliza ordered her son, Irving, and her daughter-in-law, Mildred, to call an ambulance. She ran to Charmian's crumpled form and found her mangled and moaning, but still conscious. Together, the three carried her down the hill. The ambulance arrived and rushed Charmian to a nearby hospital where, for the next 7 days, she remained in critical condition. Bay Area headlines warned of her imminent death. The horse had crushed 2 of her ribs and punctured her lung. Her entire body bloomed in deep purple bruises, but Charmian proved physically and mentally tough enough to pull through. Once released, she spent the following weeks recuperating on her narrow bed in the screened-in porch of the cottage, the same place where she had lost Jack to renal failure at age 40. She was fiercely independent and remarkably self-sufficient, and bed rest made her uneasy. On a normal day, she would exercise the horses and check on the other livestock, and then spend the rest of her day writing. Now she was too sore to sit at her desk. To be sure, Eliza brought over lunch and sat with her as she ate it. While visiting, Eliza updated Charmian on the ranch's strained finances and its daily operations, reporting on who was exercising the horses and how the ranch could earn new revenue. Despite their struggles with the ranch, they helped neighbors by inviting them to hunt for food in the forested mountainside. But when Eliza was away, or when Mildred's young children were not popping in, Charmian was alone. Sitting in her bed in the stifling August heat, she realized how desperately she wanted to be remembered. She wanted her books to remain in print. She wanted the ranch to remain a monument to the life she and Jack had lived. She wanted all that she dedicated her life to, the life she had forged and the one she had recorded and shared with Jack, to be properly remembered and celebrated. She decided that as soon as she recovered and was able, she would do 3 things. First, She would finish and move into the grand home and museum she had been building for 15 years, the House of Happy Walls. Second, she would persist and pull herself out of her writing slump and begin writing and publishing again. Third, she would find someone whom reviewers would perceive as both professional and unbiased to write Jack's biography. Within a few weeks, her vision proved true. On a mild July day, a 33-year-old writer named Irving Stone stopped by the famed London ranch to see where his favorite author had lived and meet Charmian. Eliza directed him to the House of Happy Walls, where Charmian now lived. When he knocked on her door, Charmian greeted him and gave him a brief tour of the downstairs, showing him the Jack London room, where she had just finished setting up Jack's desk as it had been in the cottage. Stone was ecstatic. He sat behind the desk and pretended to write. Charmian thought he was a bit too enthusiastic. She brought out a tray with tea, and they sat in the sunny blue and green tiled dining room, looking out at the dramatic view of the Sonoma Valley. Stone wasn't only interested in Jack. He also asked, was she still writing? She told him about her new writing project, The Log of the Dirigo, a book much like her successful book, The Log of the Snark, about their journey on a schooner from Baltimore around Cape Horn to Seattle. Although his enthusiasm grated on her nerves, it felt good to talk to another writer again. She was isolated on the ranch. When she was younger, she spent weeks at a time in San Francisco or Oakland, catching up with friends over lunches and going to plays or films in the evening. Now that the Glen Ellen Railroad no longer operated, she rarely left the ranch. She had purchased a new car, but she hadn't yet learned to drive it. Stone provided very welcome company. His visit was a reminder that she was still respected as a writer, and it felt energizing to discuss a possible writing project. Talking to Stone brought back a bit of the intellectual verve she experienced talking with Jack about books, what they were reading or what they were dreaming up to write. Then Stone revealed the real reason for his visit. He wanted to write a biography about Jack. He admired London as both a writer and a socialist. Over the years, Charmian had been approached on multiple occasions by biographers wanting to write London's life story. Most experiences had been a nightmare. Charmian approached Stone's eagerness to write a biography with caution, but he persisted. When they finished their tea and she showed him to the door, he told her she would hear from him soon. She sent him off with a copy of her biography of Jack, the Book of Jack London. Within days, his letters began to arrive, meant to woo her. Each letter was effusive in its praise of her beauty and literary achievements. He complimented her biography, saying, I have always thought you did a grand job. The amount of labor and love that went into its preparation can easily be seen by a fellow writer. I assure you that they will be my most valued possessions. In other letters, he begged her to come dancing with him in San Francisco. Each subsequent letter became more intimate. And despite their 33-year age difference and Stone's marital status, she began to think he had a crush on her. The idea both surprised and exhilarated her. 2 weeks later, on a sweltering August afternoon, I just keep laughing because it's so warm in this room right now. So when we say sweltering August afternoon, we're experiencing it, only it's July. He visited again, this time bearing a gift, an inscribed copy of his best-selling biographical novel, Lust for Life, based on the life of the Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. Stone knew that Charmian prized the inscribed copies of Jack's books. Each inscription from Jack was a time capsule love letter. During his first visit, she showed him the inscribed set she kept on an honored shelf in the Jack London room. Stone's inscription must have been intimate because after he left, Charmian couldn't stop reading it. The visit was different from the last. Instead of sitting down formally for a cup of tea in the dining room, Stone danced her around the sunlit room. She blushed at his touch. Was he really falling for her? Was there a new man on the horizon, as she wrote in her diary? Known for her allure, Charmian had a long history of men desiring her, and in many cases, she had been ready to respond. They sat in the window seat, not this one, but the one that is actually downstairs, but much like this one. They sat in the window seat and discussed the art of biography. Stone seemed to hang on her every word. After he left, she read Lust for Life from cover to cover and was quite impressed by the artful way in which Stone seemed to bring Van Gogh back to life. She wrote him to say she would consider his proposal to write a biography about Jack. Underscoring her interest in the proposed biography, she invited him to stay at London Ranch for a few days so they could become better acquainted and discuss the project in further detail. So what happens after that is he comes back, he accepts her offer, he comes back, and Stone starts taking Charmian dancing in the city. And as I said, she was very isolated, and eventually gets her to sign a contract that allows him to write whatever he wants about not only Jack, but about her. And because of that contract she signs, when he does come to the ranch, and what he proposed is a really collaborative biography, like something she would help him with, was not what he intended to write. He wanted to control the story. And what he wrote was basically that Charmian was a real hindrance to her husband. She was an airhead. And this is a woman who traveled the world, had a college education, wrote 4 books, wrote for some of the main magazines in the United States, and really led Jack London towards the fame that he received. So because of this biography that he ends up writing about her, Charmian reacts in a very intense way. Inside of this House of Happy Walls, there are some secret places. I don't know if you guys know that, but there is a secret stairwell from the top to the bottom. So her bedroom, if you go this way, there's a little cubby where her bedroom, her dressing room is, and a little kitchen. And behind that, there's a staircase that goes down to the Jack London room, which is the room I was talking about where she was talking to Irving Stone. And in that, there's one of the fake bookcases that opens, and that's where you come out from the staircase. But another one opens, and behind that is where she kept her safe. And that's where she kept all of her diaries from when she was young. Charmian kept a diary almost every day of her life. And especially in the 1890s and through the 1900s. And I would so wish to see those diaries. But because Stone went into got someone to let him into the safe and read the diaries, she burned them. She burned almost all of her early diaries. We do have her 1900 diary, thankfully, which I used to construct some of her early life. But everything else that she did, and she burned many letters, she burned a lot of things that day when this book came out. She also locked everything else in the Huntington Library. And because of that, no scholars could get to it. And so it wasn't until Earl Labor's biography that he got access via Milo, who's one of the family members. He got access to the diaries. And so that's the story of why it took so long to write a biography about Charmian. Now, there have been some wonderful books written by Clarice Stoss about Charmian, but she couldn't get access to all of the information until I was just lucky. She just was like, go write it, because she couldn't get that access. So I'm very grateful that I was able to tell Charmian's story. So I want to tell you a little bit about the House of Happy Walls where we are. This was Charmian's idea of where she could, she wanted to make a museum, something that would be a way to remember not only Jack's life, but also her life, a way to showcase the details of their life. In this exhibit here, which is part of the Trailblazer exhibit, there's a photograph of her sitting at her desk, taken by Hansel Neath, who was a famous Times photographer, lived in Sonoma County. And she has the messiest desk. It's my favorite photograph that I found during my research. She's working on the log of the Dirigo, which is a project she never finished. But this was part of the evidence that I used to prove that she had an office up here, that this room wasn't just her bedroom, right? She was a working writer. And speaking of that, right next to it, you can see her, she wore these visors. She and Jack both wore these visors. It was more tinted green when it was younger, this visor, and that was for the glare. She had neuralgia, and she suffered from nerve pain in her face and her eyes, which is part of the reason why she liked to have these calabashes to kind of dim the color, the intensity of the lights. And so what we see recreated in this room is, the other thing that she really loved was to be at sea. And so when she designed the ceiling of this house, it's like you're inside a ship. So I don't know if you can point the camera there, but it's like you're in the belly of a ship, right? And that's what she wanted to show. One other really important thing that I want to be able to show, that I may need to steal the camera to show, is that when I first came to Jack London State Park, I didn't know that Charmian was a mother. This here is her child, Joy. It's her booty that she made as part of the boudoir. She made all of these clothes for the baby before she was born. So when she was pregnant, she kept them in this little steamer trunk, and she sewed them all by hand. And unfortunately, she had a wonderful pregnancy. Actually, she burned all the photos from her pregnancy because she was a little vain. She didn't want to be seen that way. I understand. When I had my first child, I gained 80 pounds, and I do not like to look at those pictures. But the idea that Joy had been erased from the story of the museum was really heartbreaking, because Joy died at 38 hours old due to complications from birth. In fact, Charmian went into labor. Charmian was about 5'1", and she weighed a little over 100 pounds at the time. The baby was 10 pounds. It was a big baby, just like Charmian was a very large child. She was over 9 pounds when she was born to her 98-pound mother, which also caused complications. And so they had to use forceps, and when they used the forceps, they broke her spine, unfortunately. But at the same time, when Charmian gave birth, her placenta she didn't give birth to her placenta, and so she started to bleed out on the table. And so she had to go into immediate surgery. And so she saw the baby passed above her. Back then you would go under to have a baby, right? So she saw in her ether dreams, she saw the baby being passed, and Jack smiling and grinning and holding the baby. And then she was rushed into emergency surgery so she wouldn't die. And then the next thing she knew, Jack and Eliza were standing at her bedside to tell her that she lost her baby. Now, I tell you this story because every single journal entry she did, Joy was born in June, and every month for the first few years, and then every June, she would mark her birthday up until 1948. So decades after her child was born. So she was important to Charmian as a person, to Jack as a person. And so to have her back as part of this exhibit is so meaningful. The other thing I wanted to bring your attention to is Charmian on horseback. When Charmian was in her 20s and she was living in Oakland, or in Berkeley, she was commuting over to, she was a stenographer. And so she was commuting over to San Francisco every day. She was making a very good salary. She had a maid that cleaned her house that she paid for. She always believed in making the place where she lived a place of beauty. And so she had these 2 rooms she rented from her aunt Nanetta, but she was independent. She paid her own rent so that it was her own place, which was important to her. She would have statues like this one, like the statues over in the corner, all over, it was like a salon, right? She had a piano, a different piano. She received this gift from Jack. Actually, after she lost Joy Baby, he gave her a piano. This particular piano. She played piano for many years. But in that in that time period, she also saved up money and she bought her first horse. And she was so proud. She loved horseback riding. She'd ride all through the Berkeley Hills. In fact, there's a remembrance from one of her neighbors who saw her ride. She would just ride and let her hair flow and just ride astride, right? Because she's riding fast. So in the early 1900s and the late 1800s, women were expected to ride side saddle, right? So you sit like this and hold the reins like this. Well, try sitting in that position and gallop. I don't know if any of you have ridden, it hurts my abs just to try to do that. It is a sport now, but it's still done in dressage, and I'm sure it's amazing. But thankfully, we don't have to do that, nor do we have to wear pants. I mean, do we have to wear skirts all the time? So she was riding through the neighborhood like this astride, and she would scream out to kids that are like watching her, "I am a Valkyrie." Like, you know, she's a Nordic goddess. And they just were in awe of her. She also didn't have any pants because you couldn't go to the store and buy pants as a woman. And so she made her own. She bought, you can see her wearing them here. She had a skirt like this and she cut it down the middle and she sewed it into culottes, basically, so that she could ride astride. She did the same thing when they went on their snark journey, which is if you look behind you, there's a version of the snark, a model of the snark, which is the boat that they built to sail around the South Seas. And there's a picture right next to it of Jack and Charmian when they were in the Solomon Islands together. But
long enough,
right? While she's on the boat, she didn't want to have to, you know, anyone spend time on a boat before, right? It's not somewhere you want to be wearing a giant skirt, right, with all these different things attached to it. So she got herself these little like pajama pants that she wore, like silk pajama pants that she wore throughout, because and you see this a lot. I do a lot of research with women. That's what I write biography about. And women that traveled during the 1800s would travel so that they could wear pants. I mean, literally, they would become travel writers so that they could travel the world and be comfortable and, you know, not have to adhere to these ridiculous gender norms. I'm going to read one more poem and one more short passage, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. So I hope you guys are thinking of some questions. But since we mentioned the snark, I'm going to read a poem about their snark journey.
long enough.
It's called Make Them Float in Your Mouth. And they were aboard the snark 1906, 1907 is the time period I'm writing about. One word that you might need to know is the word blackbirding. And that was the kidnapping of Native people in Samoan Islands and the enslavement of them on plantations. So blackbirders would steal people and enslave them on plantations. Not something that people talk about a great deal, but it's horrible. Make them float in your mouth. If you want a story, look for it. Begin with the idea of 7 years. Imagine a boat. Build it from paper and ideas. Sail it into the hiss of lava as it enters the sea. When you reach your first destination, ride a 75-pound surfboard and fail all day. Watch the plantation workers cleave sweet fruit with machete again and again, until the story you've told yourself begins to stutter and spit. Go to Molokai on the 4th of July and see for yourself the small girl who, missing a nose or an arm and covered with sores, wears sequin clothes and dances. You have to sail on, past empty pockets and bank accounts. Watch your itinerary dissolve in the water next to the Australian yacht converted for blackbirding. See the machete lines carved into the teak door. You have to lose all of your water and then be blessed with a storm. You have to endure sores the size of baseballs that seep and cling to your calves and thighs. You have to go upriver into the luscious green tangle of unknown until the flowers emerge, red, hibiscus-like, large enough to contain the whole sunset syrupy sky. You have to find that island, make it float in your mouth. All right, I'm going to read another small passage, but I hope you're thinking of questions. The book has a lot of photographs of Charmian. One of the wonderful things I got to do when they were remodeling this exhibit and putting this exhibit together is I got to, many of the photographs, people had forgotten who these people were in the photographs, like Charmian's mother, Daisy, who was this beautiful woman, a very famous writer, wonderful writer, wrote all over the United States. So this is, I don't know if you can see it, but this is a picture of Daisy. It's up in Charmian's dressing room. And also her father, Kit, who was very charming, and an entrepreneur who bought a hotel in nearby Petaluma, and they lived there. But these people, because Charmian at the end of her life, this was Charmian's estate, right? And at the end of her life, she had a stroke and she suffered from a dementia. And because of that, if people aren't keeping that story alive, it gets erased. And so basically many of her, like even her birth certificate had errors on it, because the story of her family wasn't remembered and reported. So I think it's a really important thing to mention, that it's important that we remember the stories of people, because whoever lives or whoever is a man and famous, well, their story gets remembered and the people around them does not. Sorry, I'm a little biased because I write about women that are forgotten. Okay, I wanted to tell you about the people that came to take this famous photograph. Sorry, I went too far. Okay. Several years later, on a cool fall day in 1943, nearly 7 years after she'd begun the project of writing the Log of the Snark, I'm sorry, the Log of the Dirigo, which a book that never got finished, and it's a gorgeous text, you guys. I did get some of the passages published in Feminist Studies, but the book has not yet been put to print. This was just 5 years before, so the young photographers, Hansel Meath and Otto Hegel, visited her at the House of Happy Walls. This was just 5 years before Meath would become the second woman photographer to join the staff of Time magazine. Her husband, Hegel, worked as a freelancer for Life magazine and as President Franklin Roosevelt's official photographer. They'd recently purchased a ranch nearby and arranged to visit and photograph Charmian because they had long admired their work. Their documentary style photography was reminiscent of Jack and Charmian's photographic attempts to capture human dignity, especially in the people who had been cast off or forgotten by society. When they arrived, Charmian took the couple on her sacred walk to the hillside where Jack was buried and nearby ruins of Wolf House. Photos from that day showed Charmian poised in the ruins of Wolf House, dressed in her rugged riding clothes, a wide smile spread across her face. She looks content, as if she is smiling into the beautiful ruins of her life. When they returned to the House of Happy Walls, Hansel and Meath continued to take photographs of Charmian and the house. One photo in particular shows her seated at her desk in her large bedroom on the second floor, green visor pulled low. Her desk is covered with papers and books. Notes are pinned to pieces of paper, as if she is physically trying to pull the story together. The threads she is following to fill in the gaps of her story seem endless. She would continue, sorry, I was gonna stop there. And I do wanna say that one of the things that did happen, because at the same time, when you see this photograph, and I know that you guys on Zoom can't see it, but I tried to describe it in that description in the book. She would pin things as like sticky notes. You know how we use sticky notes to put all over? That's what I do as a biographer. I was like sticky notes everywhere. So she would pin things. That's what people did then. When they got her files at the Huntington, they took out all of those pins and just put them flat in the file. And so you have to try to piece together where everything was in her mind on that paper. And for me as an archivist, it was really troubling to see that. And I just want you to know that that's our role as people who visit the parks and who visit the archives, or we try to remember the stories of our family members. Remember that those details, like how they connected dots, are so important. So I'm gonna stop there, but I am gonna show you a few more things, but I wanna open it up to questions first. Does anyone on Zoom have a question? And then I'll open it up to you guys for the second question.
Thank you so much, Iris, for a fabulous presentation. Absolutely wonderful to be live right there in the House of Happy Walls. Thank you. I mean, it's such a treat, and your presentation is absolutely fabulous. I don't see any questions in chat from the Zoom audience.
We can ask right here. I bet there's a question, right? We got questions right here.
First question is, has anyone approached you about a film about your book?
Great question. So the question is, has anyone approached me about making a film about the book? No, not yet. If you know anybody, I know people from Pasadena are on the call. No, I think it would be a great thing. I do have the rights to it, so it is something that I'm starting to look into. Another thing that we're looking into is we are actually looking into getting funding to create a YA version of the biography and to do some curriculum development at the park to teach young girls about the story of Charmian. So that's in the works. So please do, we will be sending out information about that. Yes.
When was the House of Happy Walls actually completed? Who was the architect?
Okay, let me tell you exactly. I don't want to get that wrong.
And was the stone quarried locally?
Yes, the stone was quarried locally. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. She had a local San Franciscan architect work on the House of Happy Walls. I just want to get it absolutely right. I'm so sorry. I was going to read this section too. Okay. So she enlisted the help of San Francisco architect Harry Merritt to draft plans for her new arts and crafts style house. So this is an arts and crafts style house. And her goal was for it to be really private. So the cottage is right next to the other building on the park is right next to Eliza's house. So she didn't have a lot of privacy, and Charmian was a very private person. It's why she had the secret stairwell. And there's actually a peephole that she can look in from the stairwell. She can look in at the dining room and the living room so that she can see who's there. Because there were a lot of visitors here. And so she liked to be a little bit private. And she was really terrified of fire. And so part of the reason why she built this out of the stone and, the windows have lead, everything's very, very fortified because she was terrified of fire. They lost her father lost their hotel they were living in to fire in Petaluma when she was very young. They had fire has always been a thing in the Valley. I know it's been something we've suffered through a great deal lately. In Sonoma County, we've had a lot of horrible fires. But it's always been an issue here, at least at Jack London Ranch. It's something in the surrounding areas. It's always been an issue. And she started the construction in June 1919. And she oversaw all the details. She was very, everything was her, like the Nautilus shells eating the light bulbs that are in there. It was very important to her that everything was perfect. But she didn't move in until 1934, right after the accident. is when she moved into the house. So it took a great deal of time to build it. Part of the reason is if you think about the timing of it, what was happening in American history at that time? Well, the Great Depression happened. Things, they didn't have a lot of money to keep their ranch afloat. And the one thing that she and Eliza wanted to do for Jack was to keep the ranch alive. And so she only would, she'd work on this when there was extra money, but only if it meant that they could keep the ranch running. Yes.
In your opinion, why did Irving Stone behave in such a miserable way? Was it just a typical male thing? Or what's behind it?
So she's asking why Irving Stone behaved the way that he did. So part of the reason I began with that chapter in the book, because I was so mad when I heard that, right? As a woman, and also just as a, Jack London scholar, like I was mad. I didn't know the real story. So I wrote that chapter like 15 times before I actually got a good draft because I was so mad and I said some bad words about him, which didn't make it into the book, thankfully. But he was somebody who, he did the same thing to Vincent van Gogh, and the family is still fighting it. So many of the misinformation we know about Van Gogh, that when he was he was crazy, and that made it so he couldn't make art. And there's a lot of details that he would do to sell books. So he wrote fictional biography. So fictional biography is like, I would love for someone to write my fictional biography and make me live on a yacht, and I go to Hawaii every couple of years. I'd be great, but it might sell a lot, and there would be affairs, and like that's like what sells books, right? Like real life, like my real life would not be a good biography, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I have to do the dishes, and you know what I mean? Like, so what he was doing was he was trying to tell. He told the story where he thought, Jack London committed suicide because he was married to this horrible woman, and it really is a horrendous book. But it was the first book, it's still in print, and it was the first book that I read, the first biography I ever read when I came to the park about Jack London. And so that's how a lot of people get introduced to Jack London. And so that's why it's such a big deal that this museum now has Charmian's story.
Is that Sailors on Horseback?
I was trying not to say it, but yeah.
I assume it's not in the bookstore.
It might be. I don't know.
I think it is.
Probably is.
It
Yeah.
was.
Yes, in the back, and then you.
A couple, I hope these don't sound negative, but what do we know about her affair with Harry Houdini?
Oh, a great deal. It's not negative. It's not an affair because Jack was dead. So it was in 1918. Harry Houdini had written to her. They met in 1915. They went to Jack and her went to a show in Oakland, and then they all got of course Jack was on stage and got completely sucked in. And Houdini was also like a big kind of charismatic person, and so they all had Thanksgiving together at their favorite restaurant. Bess is Houdini's wife. And when after Jack died, Houdini wrote her a letter to tell her how sorry he was. And when she was traveling to New York, actually to write the biography, to get the contract to write the biography about Jack, she wrote Houdini to tell him that she was going. And he was like, "Oh, you have to come to my show." And so she did. And of course, in Charmian style, she wears all white, sable furs, sits in the front row, where he sat her, and goes to the show twice. Afterwards, she has dinner with Houdini and his wife, and Houdini falls madly in love with her. And what follows is a 3-week love affair. She is single, he is married. And I like to tell it this way because when the Houdini biographer wrote it, it was all put on Charmian, but he was the one that was married and she was single at the time, so I'm not sure. So anyways, she they did have an affair. She called him her magic lover in her diary. But Houdini was really into her. And at that time, Jack had died 2 years before. He was a very intense man. She was finally able to have her life on her own. And so she didn't want that. And so after about 3 weeks, she went to Maine, back to where she was from, and back to where she was when she was in 1900. She'd been there right before she went and traveled around Europe. And when she came back, she was like, "Sorry, Houdini, I'm out," and broke up with him. But it is like, the diaries are really interesting. People love that she had an affair with Harry Houdini because that's exciting, right? Like, but she didn't really have, I think it's interesting that we call it an affair because she wasn't cheating on anybody. He was, basically.
Did you have a chance to interview some old timers in Glen Ellen, like Mickey Cook, who remember her?
Yes, I've interviewed quite a few people. There is an interesting thing locally, right? Because I grew up here, and I grew up in Sonoma County, but in Sebastopol. But everybody has a Jack London story or a Charmian story, so you have to be careful because families pass down these stories, and they're not all 100% true. I know this because I come from a family with stories. So I had to listen to some of those with grains of salt, though. That's all. But great questions. Thank you. Not negative at all. Oh, wait, sorry, you had a question and then you're next. Yeah.
I have a couple things. Did I hear you say she lived in Petaluma at one time?
She did. She lived in the American Hotel, or her family ran the American Hotel, which burned to the ground.
Second, do you know why she deeded the property to Eliza?
Why she deeded which property? This property?
Yeah,
So
because I know Eliza died in 39 and she died in 55. I drive a golf cart, and I get.
yeah, no, she deeded that. She also deeded Wake Robin Lodge to Eliza eventually, because Eliza was Eliza had family that would be inheriting the property, and Irving, different Irving, excuse me, different Irving was going to be running it, so they wanted to keep it in the family, and he knew what he was doing running the ranch.
Okay, now if you've got time, like I said, I drive a golf cart. All the questions are mainly about Jack. Is there something you think I should be discussing about Charmaine?
Charmian?
People.
Yeah, you could say,
bring
hey,
up
did you
Jack.
know that Charmian helped write several of Jack London's books? That'd be a good conversation starter.
Yeah.
It's all evidenced in here. Or you could read it.
I'm not much of a
Okay, well, yeah, that's all right.
I don't
Well,
really watch movies either.
okay. Yes. And then the
Well,
last
Charmaine
question.
she had written a book about Jack London. Didn't
Yes,
she do a biography? So
She did.
After reading the book, I was always curious, why would she be willing to
Mm.
hunt for a biographer when she felt she wrote a biography?
because she wrote a biography like a couple years after her husband died. And it was really basically it's a story that Jack wanted. So Jack had a version of his life that he told the public, and Jack had a real life that he didn't tell the public about. And she was tasked with, he asked her to tell his story as it was, like who his father was, John Lennon was not his father, Chaney was, but that you would not sell books if you were a bastard child at that time. So that was their marketing, right? This was the story that they lived under, and she had vowed to him that she would write that story. So, but it's a 2-volume biography. The second one is gorgeous, and I really fell in love with her writing, especially when she's writing about Jack's death, and it's heartbreaking, and you really get to know Jack London in a way that you don't in other biographies because she knew him, right? She intimately knew him. But she has a lot of lies in the first volume. So it got dismissed. Also, there's a couple other things that got it dismissed. And so her biography wasn't making his name famous. It's like when you write a biography, you want it to launch because then that person becomes famous, right? I mean, the reason why I wrote my biography is not to launch my career, but I want people to know Charmian's story, right? So that she thought, oh, well, another biographer like Irving Stone, who sold millions of copies, he'll definitely, you know, be able to do this. And yeah, and she did. I mean, she did choose someone who kept his name alive. We're still buying it in the bookstore. Just he didn't exactly tell it so truthfully. Okay, yes.
Were they acquainted with Luther Burbank?
Yes, so there's a famous photo of Luther Burbank and Jack London, and Charmian took that photograph. That's another thing, like a lot of the photographs that you see of Jack London, Charmian took them. She was a good photographer, but no one ever thought, like the one of him on the horseback, you know, on Sonoma Mountain. That's where this project started, is I saw that photo and I saw it attributed to Charmian in a book of poems I was writing. There's a Ghost in This Machine of Air, which is my book of poems about the history of Sonoma County. And I was writing it and I came across this photograph where it said, taken by Charmian London. And I was like, what? And I called Earl Labor and I was like, did you know that Charmian took this photograph? And he's like, I never thought to ask that question. And I mean, he's a sweet, I don't say that to say anything bad about him, but he never thought of looking at it from that perspective. And I was like, that's my job. I need to look at the story from her perspective because we'll learn so much more about Charmian, but also about Jack, right? And about the story. So the answer to your question is yes, they did know him. They visited him several times, but they weren't super close. But they did get the cacti. They're over there. There's a question here. I think we have 3. Okay, go ahead.
Which of the books that she helped him with?
So The Valley of the Moon, which is we don't have here, but The Valley of the Moon is it's set in here, and they wrote it together when they were on the Dirigo. They also did the research together. They took a 4-horse wagon right when the California was putting in all the highways, right before they did that, they decided we're going to take a horse trip, you know, because everyone's got cars, but we're going to go old school with this, right? And so they went up and down the state doing research on the old stories, and that's why the story takes place all around California and Southern Oregon, and they're trying to find the perfect place to raise a family and settle, right? When they find it in the Valley of the Moon. She also helped write The Mutiny of Elsinore, which is right here, and a few other books. She edited Cherry, which was one of his later books, and she helped with editing, beginning with the Seawolf. So it's all in here, and it's something that's come up in London Scholarship now. I'm very grateful that everyone's starting to open up and look at Charmian as an important part of this literary partnership. Yes.
That was kind of my question. How did this become? This was nothing of Charmian was in here. How did that? How was she resurrected?
Great question. They started interviewing. So the park, when they were doing the revision of this room or this building, they opened it up to scholars who were working in this area. And my book wasn't out, but I'd written a lot of articles, and they allowed me in the room, thankfully. And so they got the early draft of my biography. And so you'll see many of the facts that you see on these placards are from my book before it was published. So, and they finally put it up in the exhibit today. Yay! So, it was really, I just want to say that just to end with that, as you know, I was a little girl that walked in here in 6th grade and I wanted to be a writer, and I didn't have a role model, you know, I had a role model at Jack London, but I never saw anyone that looked like me that was a writer locally, right? And so the idea that a young girl can walk in this room now and see this and see a woman writing in pants, right? And challenging gender norms and the rules that are put on women is so powerful. So for me, that was like, after this experience, I was like, I'm gonna write biographies about women for the rest of my life, because it's such a power, it empowers me, and it empowers, you know, these women that are gonna come next, hopefully. So I feel lucky to have that. So thank you so much for joining us on Zoom and in the room. And we do have books for sale here, and I bet you can get books at the Pasadena Library or at Broman's locally. They have my book there. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much, Iris, for a fascinating program. Yes, your books are at the Pasadena Public Library. Your poetry from your book, Westfire Archive, that you presented at the library is absolutely beautiful. So thank you for sharing that with us today. Also, we do have a question in chat.
Oh,
in
good.
In traveling by train from Oakland, where did they get off to get to their home?
Oh, where did they get off? In Glen Ellen. So
Oh,
Glen
okay.
had 2 train stops actually in Glen Ellen. And the train went to Santa Rosa and then down to Oakland. And then they take a ferry over to San Francisco. In fact, they did that on the day of the 1906 earthquake.
Oh,
So they
wow.
could go see everything.
Is the
Wow.
book downstairs still open? No.
Mhm.
No.
Right here.
Oh, it's right. You can buy my books right
Yeah.
now. Oh, yeah, you can buy them. Yeah, and I'll sign it for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I want to remind everyone that's actually here in Pasadena, or actually where you are at the Jack London Historic State Park, that part of the reason for this program, also to have your presentation, Iris, is for the California State Park Pass program, so that you can go to your local library and check out a Park Pass program to enable you to visit the park of your choice. And there are 200 parks in the state of California. So I thank you very much. I hope everyone has the opportunity to go to the Jack London State Historic Park and go to the House of Happy Walls. And it's very exciting. This is the first program that we've had actually virtually, actually at the place as well, and have a live audience and a Zoom audience. So very first, wonderful. And thank you so much, everyone in the room at House of Happy Walls and everybody on Zoom. So thank you, Iris. It was a wonderful program. And I do encourage everyone to get Iris's books from either the library or from Broman's bookstore.
When can we watch the recording of this?
Pardon?
When can we watch the
Oh, well, we have recorded it to YouTube Pasadena Library. We recorded it to the cloud, and it will take about a week.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You did a great job too.
The library.
Iris is your name, right? Iris?
Yes, yes.
Iris?
Thank you, Iris.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Are we on?